Hello and welcome back to Geography Rocks. In today's session we are going to complete our notes of the Challenge of Resource Management booklet. Hopefully by now you have watched all the videos on resource management and you should have watched 3 videos dedicated to completing this booklet. 2 of them were about completing part 1 of the booklet and the other video is about completing the first half of part 2. In today's session, we shall complete the final section of part 2 of that booklet. Ideally, you need a copy of the booklet in front of you, which has hopefully been completed pretty much already. If not, you will be working on paper, which is not a problem, it's just going to take a little bit longer. Do take time to complete your notes well, because ultimately we won't be going back over this in class. It is work for you to do over this summer period. So, let's move on and take a look at what we need to do. So in this section we're going to be looking at sustainable energy. You should have open on a screen Caboodle, or if not you might have the geography revision guide in front of you. You'll need to use page 296 to 297 for this first part. And it's asking you in the box below to draw a house with annotated labels to show examples of energy conservation in the home. Even if you haven't got access to Caboodle at this point, you could think about your own home or houses that you know of where energy is being preserved or conserved in some way and how that's being done. Maybe start by looking at your windows. Let's take a look. So, if we take a look at this diagram of the house, we can see that on the roof there is a wind turbine which will capture the wind and produce some energy. And there are also solar panels. If you're out for a walk and you take a look at some of the houses in your area, you might see some solar panels on roofs, etc. There's a hot water recirculation going on in this house, and they've got energy efficient appliances. Their dishwasher, their fridge freezers might be energy efficient. We talked before on one of the previous videos about how electric goods that you have in your kitchen, such as your dishwasher and your fridge and freezers, have like an energy label, like A, B, C, D it is, and it's like red to green as to how energy efficient it is. Double glazing, which is something that most of you have probably always grown up with. However, back in the day, we had single glazed windows, so they just were one layer of glass. And in the winter, you would wake up and they would be sort of frozen on the inside. And then we got double glazing. And before it was one sealed unit like we've got now, it used to be that you'd add an extra window almost inside of your existing window. And they used to slide up and down. And that's how we had our first sort of double glazing. But now we have these sealed units that you're probably more used to. Energy efficient lighting, things like the LEDs, etc. And more energy efficient light bulbs. Cavity wall and loft insulation. So cavity wall insulation are like little beads of polystyrene, and they are pumped into your walls and they help reduce heat loss and help keep heat into your home. And loft insulation is probably the easiest and cheapest thing that you can do to improve the energy efficiency of your home, and that's just by laying lagging in your roof. And so it's that sort of squidgy soft fibres that you add into your roof, and it helps hold the heat in and reduce heat loss. They talk about high efficiency water heating, and more people are investing in new technology, things like the Hive thermostat, whereby you can turn your heating on as you're driving home. So rather than having your heating coming on at 3 o'clock every day, but you not getting home till maybe 5 or 6 o'clock, you can organise for your heating to come on 20 minutes before you come in through the door. So things are changing there all the time with new technology. Pause the video now and take time to draw this diagram. If you can't draw this diagram, either print it out or just list the things that you could see in a house or on a house to help improve its energy conservation. Okay, so now we're going to look at sustainable energy in Malmö, Sweden. You should have read this page already from Caboodle, the geography guide, and it says here, to improve energy conservation, we need to consider sustainable approaches to the design of homes, workplaces and transport systems. These can be seen in innovations in Malmö, an industrial city of about 300,000 people on Sweden's west coast. Malmö's Western Harbour is one of the best examples of sustainable urban redevelopment in the world. The houses have been designed to generate and conserve energy, and the transport systems aim to reduce car usage. They talk, first of all, if we work our way through the diagram, the creation of green spaces and roof gardens. Then it talks about from 2019, all buses will run on a mixture of biogas and natural gas. Cyclists in the region have priority at crossroads. A sensor system turns lights green when a cyclist approaches. There are frequent buses and water taxis to offer public transport options for the local people, which has reduced car usage and people's carbon footprint. A car share scheme has also been introduced. In the UK, there's an area called Bedzed, and this area has also tried to encourage people to car share. So some houses were built, but they weren't built with everybody having their own driveway or everyone having their own parking space. And instead it was understood that people moving to that region would be looking to more sustainable ways to travel, and so either use public transport or use a car share option. And I think that's something that will grow and continue to develop over time. Energy comes from photovoltaic panels on the roofs of houses and workplaces. There's also a wind turbine, and biogas from local sewage and rubbish is used. The solar turbines on the outside of buildings produce hot water, which can be stored in aquifers 90 metres below the ground and used to heat buildings during the winter. The water is pumped using electricity from wind power. All 1,000 buildings in the district use 100% renewable energy. So Malmö in Sweden is a really good example of sustainable development. Let's move on. So question 2 says, research Malmö, Sweden. Identify and describe how Malmö's Western Harbour is a model for sustainable urban development. So for this question, if you go back to the previous slide here, and you take some time just to bullet point the factors that you can see in the blue boxes. Pause the slideshow here and jot down some notes in your box. Okay, so hopefully question 2, you've managed to list some of those factors now from those blue boxes around the diagram of Malmö in Sweden. Let's move on. Question 3 says, what are the ways of reducing energy demands? Well, one of the ways of reducing energy demand is by offering a financial incentive, so encouraging people to use less energy. Although it isn't an incentive as such, but having a water meter has encouraged our house to use less water, because before we were just paying a set amount, and now I'm aware that I am paying for every unit that I use, and so we tend to be a bit more mindful when we are filling up watering cans, etc., or turning on the hose pipe, or even having baths and showers, just trying to have them a little bit quicker, because we now know that there's a financial incentive in order for us to use less water. Improving education and raising awareness is important. If people are aware of the damage that their choices are having on the environment, hopefully they'll make different choices. An off-peak tariff means encouraging people to use energy at less popular times. And the final one talks about less hot water in domestic appliances. And if you watch adverts for liquid tabs that you put into your washing machine, they often say will make your clothes whiter than white or brighter than bright at 20 degrees rather than 40 degrees. And the whole idea here is about lowering the temperature of your appliance, because the washing powder is good enough to get stains out even at a lower temperature, which will cost you less because you're not heating the water, and it will help save the planet. Hotels, such as the Marriott Hotel, so looking at question 4, have made changes themselves. So, for example, they are on standby to reduce their energy if the national grid requires them to do so. They can also reduce their air conditioning in the corridors when the clients don't notice. So if you're staying at a Marriott hotel, you might notice that there's air conditioning in the corridors during the day, but that might cease late into the evenings when most people are in their rooms. They also say that the hotel chain get paid a supplement for reducing their energy use. So as their energy goes down, they are given a financial incentive for that, which makes them and encourages them to look for better ways of saving energy. Question 5 says, how are cars being manufactured and designed to be more energy efficient? This is one that you can research in your own time using YouTube or using Caboodle. But basically, cars are now lighter. They're made of carbon fibre as opposed to steel. The engines are being improved to make them more efficient all the time. Their design is much more aerodynamic to improve efficiency. We are using electric and hybrid cars much more, and they're becoming much more popular. And we are using biofuel technology in the production of our cars and making our cars run on biofuel technology, which is reducing the need for them to require petrol. Let's take a look here at the Chamba-Montera microhydro scheme, which is represented on pages 298 to 299 of Caboodle. And the first question is about where this area is. So if you take a look at the map, you can see that Chamba-Montera is in northwestern Peru within the Andes Mountains. It says there, why does this region need a sustainable energy supply? And it is all due to location. Development is restricted due to isolation and small-scale subsistence farming, some coffee and livestock cash crops. There are steep slopes and rough roads which make it inaccessible in winter. It's uneconomic to supply electricity, especially with such low population density. Pause now to take some notes for question 2. Hopefully you've already written down the answer to number 1, where this area is. Question 3 says, what is the Chamba-Montera microhydro scheme? And then finally, question 4 says, complete the mind map to show how the scheme has benefited the local community. So let's take a look. This is the scheme here, and it says that it's the solution to the energy deficit involved in the construction of microhydro scheme supported by the charity Practical Action. The high rainfall, steep slopes and fast-flowing rivers make this an ideal area for exploiting the water as an example or a use of renewable source of energy. And you can see that in diagram C, how it works. The total cost of this microhydro scheme was $51,000. There was some government money and investment from Japan, but the community had to pay part of the cost. The average cost per family was about $750. Credit facilities were made available to help pay for this, so they were then given the energy which will help their communities. Take a moment to take some notes about what the scheme is, and if you need to, make a little sketch of diagram C to show how the scheme works. Question 4 is asking us to complete a mind map to show how the scheme benefited the local community. So let's take a look. These are the benefits to the local community. They've regulated the flow of water, which has reduced the dangers of flooding. There's less need to burn wood as a source of heat, which means that there's less deforestation, which is in turn reducing soil erosion. The scheme will last for at least 25 years, so it's got longevity. Electricity is now available in the winter when heating demands are higher. Reliable electricity can now be used for refrigeration, light and other uses like computers and entertainment, which means that these communities can access other areas of the world via the internet. Street lights allow people to go outside after dark, and they are greater safety. Healthcare has improved because refrigeration allows storage of medicines. There are better school facilities and the possibility of doing schoolwork at home after dark, which means that things even as simple as literacy rates increase as a result of this small scheme. There's reduced risk of fire because they're not using kerosene in lamps anymore or as much. They are using their electricity, so there's less chance of fire in the home. Business development is possible as piped water can drive small machines for coffee dehusking and processing, so they can sort of process the coffee beans that they've grown, but equally they could even use things like sewing machines, etc., so develop things, textiles and making goods in small scale ways. There's a reduction in rural-urban migration, and so the population has sustained and grown a little. Previously, people would have moved away, leaving the old and frail and more vulnerable members of the community left behind. So actually it's been good for the region in the fact that it's made the area more sustainable. Pause now to complete your mind map and then join me on the next slide. Okay, so in this little section we're going to be looking at Freiburg in the southwestern tip of Germany, and it is a region which has really embraced sustainable development. In the UK, as I've said before, it's worth looking at a region called BedZ. So you can find that on YouTube. There's some little 3 or 4 minute clips on BedZ and they show what's being done in the UK. But Freiburg in Germany is a really good example of sustainable urban strategies. Now these strategies are to encourage providing green spaces for people, recycling water, reducing the reliance on fossil fuels, rethinking your transport options, keeping city waste within the capacity of local rivers and oceans to absorb them, involving communities, local people in making decisions, conserving cultural, historical and environmental sites and buildings, and minimising the use of greenfield sites by using brownfield sites instead. Now, a greenfield site is an area of virgin land that's never been built on before, whereas brownfield sites are areas that have been built on and are maybe derelict or no longer in use, and it's about reusing those areas that have been built on before. It says at the bottom there that local people can invest in renewable energy resources. In one district they have invested over 5 million in 9 windmills, 8 solar energy systems, a hydroelectric plant and an energy conservation scheme at the local school. In addition to financial returns, investors receive free football season tickets. So there's incentives, financial incentives and social incentives for them to take part in this. The financial rewards are given to people who compost their green waste and use textile nappies. So if you are using renewable nappies, you are given a financial incentive to do that. Let's take a look. So Freiburg has 90 kilograms per head non-recyclable waste as opposed to Germany's average of 122 kilograms. More than 1 million corks are recycled each year. A biogas digester for organic food and garden waste which is collected weekly. They're provided energy for 28,000 homes from burning waste. They've reduced their annual waste disposal from 140,000 tonnes to 50,000 tonnes in 12 years. More than 88% of packaging waste is recycled, and there are over 350 community collection points for recycling. So, the first question is asking us to list 5 problems associated with urban living. So think about any town or city that you know of, you're going to think about space. Space is a problem associated with living in a city, as is waste. Where does it go? Where can it be put and placed? Congestion. Think about the last time you travelled into a city, all the cars that you came across. Congestion is a big issue for our urban areas, which links to pollution. And then energy resources, just having access to water, electricity, all of those things, there's bigger pressures in urban areas. Freiburg set a goal of becoming sustainable in 1970, and then it asks us to describe where it is located. So if we take a little look here, we could write that Freiburg is in the southwestern tip of Germany, close to the border of France and Switzerland. Question 3 asks us to describe with examples how the local people of Freiburg are involved in decision making about their city. And then question 4 asks about the kinds of jobs that have been created. So we've got diagrams here to help us with both of these. We've talked about the first one previously, that people are encouraged to develop in renewable energy resources. They are given financial returns and they are given social benefits as well, so the free football tickets. And even on a small scale, families who use cotton nappies are encouraged to use them. They're given a financial incentive if they don't use non-renewable nappies. So right from a small scale right to a community scale. Taking a look at the jobs that have been created in Freiburg, so let's have a little look. This says, Freiburg Solar Valley. More than 10,000 people are employed in 1,500 environmental businesses in the city. More than 1,000 people are employed in the solar technology industry, producing advanced solar cells and the machinery used to make them. So this solar factory employs 250 people making the panels. A solar training centre provides training in the skills needed for the new solar technology. The Institute for Solar Energy Systems conducts research and has developed new systems for solar cooling and air conditioning. Many solar institutions have their HQs in Freiburg, and the city hosts major European solar energy conferences. So even that last one, if you're having a conference, then people are going to come to Freiburg, they're going to stay in the area, and that's going to produce a positive multiplier effect for the cafes, the restaurants, the bars, the hotels, etc. in that region. So you can list those jobs in question 4. You may need to pause the video now before we continue to make sure that you've got substantial notes down, and then join me on the next slide. This is the final slide. You've done really well in completing this booklet. This is the final slide, and question 5 is asking us to add figures to this picture. We saw this picture previously, and we've talked about some of the jobs that have been created in this area, so just writing down some notes around that picture would be ideal. You may need to pause the video in order to do that. Question 6 asks us to consider this question. Resources are not wasted in Freiburg in order to protect the environment for future generations. Reducing and reusing waste is key to their environmental planning, as is developing brownfield sites. Copy the examples diagram from page 187 here. And I think this is the diagram that was being talked about, so you need to take notes and copy that little mind map diagram in the space below. We've already talked about it. You're going to need to pause the video here in order to complete your booklet. Your booklet should now be completed. Please remember that it is the energy section that we will be looking at in the GCSE exam. That's the area that you need to particularly focus on. However, all of this information helps us understand resource management as a whole. You've done really well to listen to the videos and complete this booklet with the use of Caboodle and the information that I've shared with you. So well done. Please take a moment just to check through your booklet and make sure that it is easy to read, that it makes sense, and that you have completed all the questions. If need be, go back through the PowerPoints or back on Caboodle, or even take time to look at examples of projects such as the micro hydro scheme that we looked at, such as Freiburg's Solar Valley, or such as Bedsed or Millamo in Sweden. So take a look back on YouTube at some of those examples of how places are trying to consider their energy use and be more sustainable in the future. And then maybe take a look at your own selves and your own homes and think about the small changes that you could make to make a larger difference. Well done on everything that you have done on this section of the geography units. You've worked really hard on resource management. This brings to an end our work on resource management. My name is Mrs. Wingham, and you've been listening to Geography Rocks.